I think you saw my paper that I wrote this award today. But I know in my paper, I refer a lot to what you have written before. Again, it's this transfer of ideas and knowledge. And I do mention a lot of what you say. And I want to mention something that is very important to us. Your lecture mentions journeys, my people, leaving the island, migration patterns. But in the future, in the next few months, we are going to be hosting, Angola is going to be hosting the 8th Caribbean Symposium on Genealogy and History. And the theme, right here, the theme for that is diaspora, journeys, research, and reparations. Well, reparations wasn't mentioned today, I don't think. But all of these come together in this theme. And we want to invite everybody. There's a lot of papers that's been published, and we invite everybody to participate, to present papers, to make this great future. Thank you very much for your lecture. There's so much you want to talk about.
I just want to follow on, thanks Tim, on the jollification thing. To show you jollification is not just pouring ground or pouring cement. I see Linda here and Marcel just there. I don't think anybody else was here. But we produced a play way back in 71, Linda? Mariana. Before we did that play, nobody knew the name Mariana. That's a fact. That's long before the hotel. That's long before Mariana Cooperative. That's long before Mariana. We dug up from a little old book that my father had. I used my theater skills, which were fresh at that time. Here's the point. Mariana was a really first-class production that was taken to Carifest, that got all sorts of accolades to the Virgin Islands and to Trinidad. It was the subject of a philosophical discussion in Trinidad about social development and the attitudes of slave societies to development. The discussions that took place in Trinidad about Mariana, I did not understand. The American fellows were way up there. Right? But here's the point. The way I was the director of Mariana, yes, but Mariana was done through improvisations. So if I wanted Linda to do a certain part or to move to a certain play, which is the director's prerogative, she would have to find her own words to express that position or what she did. Same with Marcel, same your late sister, Gloria, was one of the stars of the play. And everybody else. Improvisation asks you to put your intellect and your passion and your emotion into it, whatever it may be. And to this day, I know, and I'm asking, I know that the success of that play was because of improvisation and not by a scripted playwright who wrote every line that every actor had to follow. So, Ron is right. You have to look at jollification differently. And sometimes I think we fall into the trap of feeling jollification by that whole time stuff. That's peas and corn. Peas and rice, very nice. The eat it once, you eat it twice. That kind of thing. It's not. It's not. It has a modern utility if you look at it differently.
Okay, in the back, I see a hand. Oh, it's Talbot. Hi, Talbot. You want to come to the mic so everybody can hear you? Good evening, everyone. David, that was just an amazing presentation. And while I was not surprised that it would be excellent, what really touched me was that you you relied on so many diverse authorities. I couldn't imagine that I'd be in a presentation, an emancipation lecture, looking at myth and the thinking of Joseph Campbell, for instance, and then talking about the spiritual connection with the land and all of that. But what my question for you has to do with, it has to do with where you started, and you talked about this book you read about, the anxious people. I can't remember exactly now who the writer is. I'm going to look it up. I know it's a trend in social psychologists. But you spoke about the anxious thoughts, the anxious emotions, the anxious behaviors. And I wonder to what extent, perhaps, that configuration or that approach would yield some kind of a solution for the gang violence and the, just the general violence that we're experiencing. And, our own form of anxiety, as you described, even in this moment where supposedly we're free. I want you to think about that a little bit across, and you have shared thoughts, but the Reverend who wrote so beautifully and who you relied on so much in describing, the Anguillian, who the Anguillian, that Anguillian identity. I don't know that you could apply that, those same labels to where we are now. And it was with a little bit of sadness that I stretched that reality that you created for me into the situation with the boats and the boat racing and the nearly 300 people who will be on those boats and, focus, and how with just perhaps one arbitrary incident, because, there's always the Island Harbor and the West End and the Blowing Point and which we know the boats and, like that. And it's not for fear, but it's a reality. How can we, with all of that, all of those resources, and all the incredible creativity that I know we're all capable of here, how are we going to do it? And I love that you shared about Mariana and the unique way you directed it, because maybe it's that kind of opportunity again that could yield that outcome that somebody needs to direct. And the reason why I believe we had such a terrible experience with the boat in Island Harbor getting it down is because nobody, sadly, had shared that bit of knowledge before. I say that, I'm quite familiar with boats and stuff like that, but it hadn't occurred to me. And I know that all the fishermen and all the people struggled to get it down there and all those incredible machines. I mean, if we had that little bit of knowledge. Well, there you go. And that has, well, I didn't know it. But that has to do with transmission. And I think that is what is the Reverend was asking us to do as well. How are we going to transmit it? So any thoughts you can share on that? And again, thanks for another brilliant, brilliant presentation. I don't know what we'll do when you are no longer with us, if that happens. No, I'm listen. This is the age we're in. We're anxious people. Yes, thanks a lot. God bless you. God bless Anguilla.
Okay, thank you very much. And Marvin spoke about transmission, and Jancy said we have it, but we've lost it. So that brings us to the discussion on the anchors that Mr. Carter says are slipping. And those anchors include frugality, cutting and contriving, spiritual discipline, loyalty to land, to family, to home, and these are being replaced by globalization, although maybe that has had its day, lower regard for morality, and greater individualism. And is not for somebody to do it. I think Mr. Carter made it clear that all of us have to do it.
David, again, excellent presentation. And I think the right person had been chosen for this session, given your own maritime experience, because in my opinion, a large part of Angola's emancipation has been achieved through the sea. Our forefathers and their initiatives, their skills, Abraham Lincoln's skills going way back, no power tools, and they built those magnificent schooners. We spoke about how they were launched into the sea, but when they got them into the sea, eventually, that mammoth task, the journey had just begun. The purpose of the boat was to go to other islands, and we needed the skill in manning these boats. Perhaps in those days they didn't even have compasses. I hear stories coming from a maritime family, how they sailed by this star and that star. And in a modern world, we have GPS that tells us where the reefs and the islands were. And it makes us quiver to imagine how our forefathers manned those boats, sailed all the way to the Dominican Republic and got to all those islands without being, shipwrecked. We made it as a people, and we brought it out. We were emancipated through resilience. We didn't have the technology. They had abandoned us because Angola did not have the resources back in those days, agriculture, no, and we were left alone. And we had to connect with the rest of the world, and we did it skillfully by the building of these boats. I recall as a youngster going to school in the road, we didn't have the lifts to pull the boats out of the water, and they used to take the boats, heel it over onto another boat till the boat kicked up out of the water. And then they went into small boats with tools and took off the barnacles and then painted the bottom. And after weeks of doing that, they turned it around, leaned it over like it was sinking onto another boat, removed the barnacles. History. Because we were people so resilient, we found ways to do things. And I know that's an area of your passion, or various sea captains that connected us to the rest of the world, men who lost their lives. They are our heroes. And I'm always heartened to come in your boatyard and delighted that you have picked up that industry to a higher level, because it had died out in Angola. And again, we are connected to the rest of the world with the most magnificent custom yachts. And, we as a people being resilient, and that resilience is kind of lost today. And we have a lot of work to do to bring it back. But excellent discussion. And I know we want to talk about how the marine life, the rest of the marine life, when the boats were launched, how it continued with the emancipation. We could probably take several other sessions here. But thank you. Excellent presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Since Claude asked me that question. I would love to share this little story with you, which doesn't have, although it deals with boats and schooners, as Claude says, it shows the spiritual connection of people who are into what they have and who they are, and their identity is totally complete in what they do, which was the generation before 1967 that came out of all of this. Claude is the grandson of the great legendary captain from Blowing Point, Joe Romney. I had the privilege as an 11-year-old boy to meet Joe Romney in St. Kitts. He was just like Claude, but 20 to 100 pounds smaller. My grandfather was the builder of the legendary school on Warspite, and he gave the Warspite total control on Warspite to Captain Joe Romney. Here's the true story. Brought tears to my eyes when I first saw it. My father was, as a young candidate for the ministry, working under the superintendent in St. Kitts. He hadn't been ordained yet, he was still reading a lot of the Bible. And the church told him he had to go to Montserrat. He had to move to Montserrat. Those days, there's no flights. So you go down on the jetty and you look for a boat that's going to Montserrat. And out of the blue, in comes the Warspite with Captain Joe Romney as the captain. She said, "Oh, that's my father's boat. I must catch a lift and I gotta pay for it." So Captain Joe said, "Of course, come. We're going to Dominica, we'll stop in at Montserrat." My father tells a story that when the Warspite was sailing, Captain Joe sat on the wheel. There's a wheel box and it's, ship's wheel with the spokes. And he would hold the top spokes with his 2 hands and the bottom spokes he would hold with his 2 feet. So he had the wheel in 4 positions. And then he saw a squall coming down from Antigua, and he knew that would be tricky this time of year, hurricane season. So he ordered the crew to reef the sails. Reef the sails meaning you shorten the sails. So then this high, you lower them a little bit so that the pressure on the schooner was not as much. And just before the squall hit, he told my father, he said, "Well, you go down here in this cabin, stay down there until the squall is past." So my father had to go down, but he was in a position where he could go back up straight at Captain Joe because the cabin was right in front of the wheel. So he could see Captain Joe. And he said, so he couldn't see the sea, he couldn't hear the wind, all he could see was Captain Joe, but he felt when the squall hit the vessel, all the creaking and groaning of the shrouds and the vessel heaving. And in all that maelstrom, he said he saw Captain Joe with 2 feet on the wheel, with 1 hand on a spoke, and with his right hand stroking the wheel, and simply saying over and over, "Take it easy, Warspite. Captain Joe got you. Take it easy, Warspite. Captain Joe got you." A spiritual connection with a thing, right? A spiritual connection with a thing, because that was his life. And it speaks to the passion that generation may have had, which I think, and I come back to myth. I don't know if Captain Joe was a good man or a bad man. I don't know if Captain Joe treated his family well or not. I don't know anything about him except that he is for me a hero. That's my myth. Try to take it from me. This is where the power myths come. We all, I think, all have some ancestor, some family member, somebody out there who is special, who is an example, who has touched us. And we might know what kind of wickedness they were up to when they were in their teeth. I don't know. But there is a myth that supports you in your everyday life because of that reverence you have for that. And that is why myths are important. And in the same way, they can be effective for us individually. It can be very effective for us nationally. And this is the time, I think, that maybe we need to go look for them and go around to them for their.
Thank you very much. And I have to highlight here the innovation, the time, dedication and passion, faith, and that ethic of community. And then we saw that loyalty to family that just came out when Mr. Roman defended his grandfather every single day. So we have Ursula, and then after we have
I must say thanks to the organizers for this session.
Okay, sorry, Ursula, I have to say something as I see these people standing now. So I'm going to acknowledge Miss Janet Lake, history teacher at the Alpena Lake Hodge Comprehensive School. Please give her a round of applause for being here. And the two ladies that went out just in front of her, I don't know if you can get them to come back and speak so that they can be acknowledged. They are founding members of a new club at school called Caribbean Time, and they are going to be. So here they are, young ladies, so we're making sure that we transmit. Please give them a big, inspiring round of applause. So thank you, Ms. Lake, for bringing them, and have a good night. Okay, so sorry for the interruption.
What I was going to say, that's exactly connected to the children.
Okay. So children, you have to listen.
It was a pleasure to be here. The lecture was very informative. As I was listening, I was thinking about the myth of slavery in Angola. Historians have written that there was less than 3,000 enslaved persons in Angola. And at that time, the economic activities that were being done in Angola did not facilitate slavery like the other Caribbean territories. So the myth that slavery was not really slavery in Angola could be turned into fact, right? Because before Mrs. Scotty did say that fact had no bearing. A myth had no bearing in fact. But we found out that myths also are part of what makes, well, facts are also part of what makes myth. Because the 300 enslaved Africans that were part of the church, right? They, due to how slavery was in other societies, enslaved Africans could not hold any positions in church. Okay? So maybe that is where the myth of no slavery being found in Angola came from. All in all, the lecture was very informative. I'm gonna go home and listen to it again, and I'm also gonna share it with my
Thank you.
I must say thanks to the organizers, and I hope that we continue to keep this lecture going on, particularly at this place, as you say, starting the Ebenezer, and to take up from Sakati. Thank you too for accepting to come, and as always, you do these good presentations. So as I encourage the lady to come back, it's because when I came in and I saw the scan part of the audience, and then I've got the builder. But then I'm looking for you more useful people, and I'm not seeing that. And then I saw children behind them, that person. You know? So I was saying, even though sometimes it seems that all is lost, all is not lost. There will always be a remnant to do something. And as you read the scriptures, many passages you are finding, it speaks about the remnant. And as Mr. Mr. Carter spoke about the spiritual connection. It was there where I was getting up to talk. Now, you know, I'm a right woman and a free woman and whatnot. So we say, with the church, we are free people in Angola. Yes, we know we had slavery and whatever, we know people didn't see, but we didn't stay there. A small island like Angola with 20 square miles. And over 40, nearly 50 churches I'm hearing. I don't know when it was 33. We do have freedom. When you look at in the news over there, shut up now so that you can get up. A few days ago, when you were hearing about the places in different countries where the churches are burned down and things like that. Some morning I see a man that I know I listen to on the TV. And the man is just saying you can actually see the flames in the temple, you know, and things like that. So with God, you know, we are blessed. And as you spoke about, you know, when we used to have these big trucks doing all this concrete thing and thing, our people had to do things one. And know that we have so many funerals. I'm delighted when I go to the funerals and I see the young boys that we had in school, somewhere we talk about the good degrees and what have you, but they're just shoveling up the thing and whatnot. And even the young boys actually saw this big boat up in Island Harbor and whatnot. And we talk about raking the salt, right? The young people know they're actually going down there and going down in the salt. When I was a little girl, they didn't have cars. They go down there and bring up somebody, paint bucket on your head, you walk from sand down to stone ground, right? But now I find myself going in the pond with the young people and we stand there and we go to the land and we go to break up a bunch of salt and wash it off and things like that. So I am still out there helping. I'm not writing, I have started writing. One enough writers. So I'm promoting people to carry on, and Angola has some of everything. So everything, okay, we can just carry on.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Carty. Congratulations on an excellent presentation. I believe I know what you went through to prepare for this evening. I'm sorry for being late, Dr. Banks, and thanks for the invitation. 2 points and then a question. To the extent that myth helps a people, then they have value. And so I agree with you on that point. To Mrs. Carty, in the context of the fact that activity, drought, back then led to wealth now, perhaps you could look at it from a biblical point of view, or perhaps Martin Luther King's view or comment that I have seen the promised land and I may not get there with you, in the context that the poverty of years gone by was necessary for those who would come after to reap the riches that would follow. I didn't cause that, I'm sorry. I did spend some time in the Middle East and I picked up a similar theme. Bedouin tribes people who spent centuries occupying the desert and oil was found, then became wealthy. So the same concept lies there. I agree, Mr. Carty, that perhaps the myth that there was no slavery here may have had some benefit. But my question to you is, at what point does a myth, especially in the context of slavery, become a serious problem? Because I think that is also something that we should ponder. Thank you.
That since that slavery was a myth in Angola, slavery didn't exist in Angola, that myth takes root. And that's why I think I was clear in saying that is an absurdity. We had slavery. Slavery did exist. Slaves were sold under the mahogany tree. We all have what we experience today. But in differentiating the 3 sections of our history, if you look at Angola before 1796, Angola is a classic plantation society with all the evils, all the brutality, and all the economic slavery that exists in Angola was no different. It is that transition of destruction and process control that made things wobble. And I think I was clear in saying, the commercial that existed wasn't any altruism. It was the exigencies of existence. So yes, you're right. We have to be careful that you propagate a myth to such an extent that it becomes the truth. And I do not advocate that. I would never tell a student that there was no slavery. But I will try and explain, as I've tried to do tonight, that the amelioration that took place because of economic and social and institutional collapse has, in my view, served us well in the long run. Not only the 1826 with the House of Commons report has the record of a murder of a Negro boy, right? A slave. And you, in the first part, I read you what he said, acts of the most despicable nature conducted with impunity. So, that ugly part of what slavery was definitely here. But because it flipped, because of war and circumstance, we have become the beneficiaries, or the generation of the 1967 become the beneficiaries. Why I say that we are still a work in progress is that, of course, 1967 was perhaps the most historic year in our entire history. And that changed the trajectory completely for Angola. Well, we are still a work in progress. A lot of us here were still alive in 1967. So we are part of that process, and we have a generation duty to ensure that all the hard work and amazing progress that Angola makes is not dissipated because we have not held fast to those values that Reverend Bible said. At the end of the day, that is what he's talking about. And if we let them go, as a result of the internet, and I am, like Jonathan Hyden, I am scared of the internet. I am scared to see you go to a restaurant and two people having dinner and the two of them on their phone. And I'm talking to each other. As soon as something stops, the phone goes up. Right? And what are you looking at? In the case of young men and young women, parents have to be doubly careful. And if they're young mothers or single mothers who have to hold on 2 or 3 jobs, they have the time to monitor this. These are the things that make us anxious, and these are the things that perhaps are one of the reasons why we have the difficulty we have today. And it takes all of us to be with.
Right, serious words. So there again, we have our paradoxes and the fact that emancipation is a journey and every generation has to try to liberate itself. So now we have
Hello, can you hear me? I'm not sure if this is working, but I like David. Always one, and one is all we. We're all in that anxious moment together. Sometimes we forget that those who are perpetuating the violence are also anxious. And they're perpetuating the violence because they are anxious. So empathy is something we need to work on while we realize that all of us are in that boat together. If I was to ask anybody in this room, are you anxious on a scale of 1 to 10? I would say I'm like way up there, because we're not sure what's going to happen next. We're waiting for the ball to drop. And so, David, thank you very much for your presentation. Always one, and one is always. If we think about that, if we process that, and we see the Bible tells us we are brothers people, we are sisters people. If we have that view of life, we can change a lot of stuff. It's not going to change overnight. We talk about the internet. For several years, I don't have a TV on in my room. Caused me some anxious days and nights. I thank people like Mr. Pickering and Lloyd, who have been bringing images of us on the TV. But the TV has a job to exacerbate our anxiety. That's how they get their ratings. You know, and we are like sheep. We follow them, we turn it on, and we soak it up. And then we become anxious. And our young people have the phone in their hands, and that's a sign of manhood and womanhood. This phone in my hand. But what will necessarily be perpetuated there? So we are all a we is one, and one is all a we. If we adopt that mentality, that's a more jollification mentality. All of us are in this together. The other night I had something in memory of my mother. She gathered us around and told stories and sang songs, and we learned them. How many mothers, how many fathers are gathering the children around and telling them stories? Telling them stories and teaching them songs. Is that a tradition that we're losing? Have we lost it? Can we regroup it? Can we take it back? I think we need to examine these things carefully because we can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. We can't throw out the oral tradition, you know, with the electronic tradition. Of course, progress has a way of marching on in spite of. How can we use the progress to help us rid ourselves of some of this anxiety? How can we look at the young people in our community? If I turn back, how can we look at the young people in our community and know that they're not bandits? They're not bad people. They are anxious too. We are all in an anxious moment. How can we try our best to reach out to those around us who are anxious, not as our enemies, but as people who are part of us? All of we is one, and one is all of we. I think that's a wonderful invitation. So let's do what we can to help each other.
Yes, I agree, and thank you for stressing that interdependence. We saw that interdependence broke down barriers in 1796, so there was no distinctions between the haves and the have-nots, and everybody had to try to eke out a living. Everybody was at a level of subsistence, and yet we are here because we are rainbow people. And also, I like the fact that you talked about the anxious generation being inclusive of all of us. So there again, that breaks down all the barriers. It's not us versus them. All anxious and expressing it in different ways. But we have to have that spirit of fellowship that expresses it in a way that takes us to a new time of freedom. Reverend Celestine?
A long walk to freedom. A long walk to freedom. Question that Oh, thank you again, Brother Kati. Sitting down there, I felt proud to associate, if I should say so, with the Methodist Methodist Church just listening. And the question is not for you, but for all of us. I really, the way that you presented that spiritual element, highlighting the spiritual element in your presentation, and the question and the label, as was said early on by this minister, in terms of the description that he gave to the people of faith, to the people of Umbrella. And then he asked, well, then he said, he commented, hold fast that which you have. And so my question for us, where are we as it relates to the scripture, as people of faith, from the different Christian denominations, where something each one of us need to ask ourselves, because there is now that, in terms of the society, there seems to be a disconnect in terms of church and what is happening within our society. There is not that respect, even for that institution, the church, anymore. There is not that fear of God. And so we have to ask ourselves, as a people, we are both told to hold fast, or we are not hearing. Where are we as it relates to those labels and descriptions that were said of us?
Thank you very much. If we are not holding fast, that charge is repeated in a very timely manner tonight. And speaking about the internet, and because we are an anxious generation, and because I was introduced as a career educator, and that only doesn't happen in a classroom, I wanted to share some things about making us less anxious. And that's very important. These are trending words. Take a mental break. People keep asking me about taking a mental break. Mental breaks are important. It's also sometimes important, not only for young people, but older people are also glued to their phones to take social media detoxes. You have to put them away, put them in a different room from where you are, and do something else for a while. You should also seek good news, because as Dr. Banks says, and other people as well, it's the bad news that triggers us and that sells and that gets all of the views. So consciously seek out good news and also accept good news, because people don't really like to accept good news. You know, it's almost like, okay, so what? But if it's bad news, tell me again. So we have to really shift that kind of thinking and seek out and accept good news, and then also the spiritual life that Reverend Celestine was referring to, and also being community-minded and making sure that we engage in fellowship, such as we are doing here now. All of those are very important to do, and we should not only keep that to ourselves when we, find out those secrets, and they're so simple. None of those things cost anything, and we should share them with one another, young and old, to make sure that we remain healthy in this awesome space called Anguilla, which will be awesome again. So,
It's still awesome.
which is awesome, it's true. As I drive along the road and I see how beautiful it looks, as I came up there, I said, this is really like a paradise. It really is. It's the human component we have to work on, but the space itself is an awesome space. Okay. So maybe we can wrap up our conversation, because we are going to talk again next year, right, Marijuana Poetry Committee? And we can talk in between as well. So at this time, I would like to invite Mr. Sanford Richardson for an expression of thanks.
Someone once said that giving a vote of thanks is not an opportunity or an occasion to give a speech. So I try to heed those words. Cultural anchors and myths, revisioning our emancipation journey. As we come to the end of another evening in commemoration of emancipation and the 194th anniversary of the Ebenezer Chapel, and the Hannah Poetry Emancipation Lecture Organizing Committee. Gonna call your name, just put your hand up, please. Avon Carty, Annika Hughes, Carla Harris, John C. Webster, Renee Henry, and Phyllis Fleming Banks. And the Ebenezer congregation, we'd like to thank our presenter, Mr. David Carty. I add in here, I've said it before and say it again proudly. He was my favorite teacher in high school. Like that is not me. In fact, Mr. Carty was dynamic, thought-provoking, enriching and educational presentation, and all the response that your presentation evoked. Mrs. Rita Celestine Carty, also able chairing the proceedings. And thank you as well. Honorable Minister, Social Development, Mrs. Diane Kentish Rogers, for taking the time to be here and for her remarks and challenge for wider involvement in this active exercise. Thank you. Our Superintendent Minister, Reverend Vincent Celestine, offered up prayers and the Methodist Circuit and Anguilla and the Avenida family for continuing to partner with us to ensure the continuation of this annual lecture series. Mr. Lennox Vanderpool will honor his roots, Bingi, and the Ebenezer Men's Fellowship for their continued contribution and art, music, and song. I believe at this juncture I should do this. Ruth Bingi would have, since we were last year, would have lost one of their members, Elvin, Brooks. And if I'm not asking too much, I'm sorry, there you go. If I just stand just for a moment of recognition. Jesus will rest in peace. Be seated. Mrs. Stella Gums, for your assistance in distributing the Reverend Dr. Virginia Gums Award, every year, yes, you will become even more proud of him and the work that he has done, and for your continued support of this initiative to celebrate the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Virginia Gums. We again applaud and congratulate all the participants, including Dr. Dimitri Hodge for his winning submission and Mrs. Charlene Gums for her contribution as well. We are particularly grateful to D3 Enterprises and Council Corporate Services for their financial contributions to help make this event possible. And of course, we must thank the media, Radio Umbrella, Lawrence Live, KCN Television, Classic FM, Cool FM, Upbeat Radio, and Brilliant Newspaper for their part in promoting and covering this particular lecture. We pick up the Ebenezer technical team upstairs. Thank you as well. Our colleagues at the University of West Indies Global Campus Anguilla Library Service, Department of Youth and Culture, and the Department of Education, we thank you. And most importantly, we especially thank you, the audience, those who have joined us here at the historic Ebenezer Chapel in the Valley Anguilla, and those who joined us online for sharing in this experience. Give yourselves a round of applause. We have tokens of appreciation for the speaker, the chairperson, that we will distribute immediately following after I leave the lectern. So I'm going to invite a person now to do that, and I wish all of you a pleasant night after we sing our closing song.
Thank you very much, Brother Sanford. And on behalf of the Malahama Poetry Organizing Committee, we want to say a very special thank you to Rita Celestine Carty again for doing such a wonderful job. Proud of you and for the work that you have.
This one is for our good friend David Carty. I think every time he gets a call from Jancy, right, he's like, oh no, what is it? But we know what we have, and we are extremely grateful for your contributions. And so we prepared this little, in this Angola colors, we wanted to say, on behalf of the Malahana Poetry Committee, we want to say to Mr. David Carty, thank you for your contributions to the development, to the continued development of Angola.
So we stand and sing the right hand of God. See the benediction, go in peace. Make a difference in your world. Respect each other. Be filled with empathy. Enjoy your freedom and give God thanks in all things. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.